This movie begins with an opening scene showing a young man whose name is James standing in a private hospital ward and his mom rushing out telling him that his dad was dead. This tragic scene shows James going out of the hospital in blind fury and so much disappointment. Despite everybody trying to stop him, he refused to be stopped. He was so sad because his father, Mr. Sampson, has just died. It looked as if there is no longer light at the end of the tunnel for him and his family members. Stay tuned to know what happened next in the waiting world. Next scene shows a family visiting their friends with their children and the mother looking pregnant. Their friend even continued to congratulate them, saying how God has been good to them, and this is like the third pregnancy so far. Later at night, Mrs. Bidemi is seen crying and praying to God about the case of the fruit of the womb, while her husband tried to encourage her in the Lord, telling her to keep her faith in God and not look at other people's testimony because her time will come soon. But she refused because she knew that her friend and her married at the same time, but her friend has gotten her third child and she is still barren. Her husband told her to keep having faith in God because he is the one that gives children and no one else. The next scene shows her in the pastor's office. The pastor was seen admonishing her, telling her that why is she worrying about the matter of children when indeed it is the Lord that gives children and not any man. This is a disclaimer. This movie is in no way to replace the original produced by Mount Zion Movie Production and written by Mrs. Gloria Bamiloye. Please, if you wish to get more information, go to their YouTube channel and watch the full movie to get all the juicy details. Now let's get back to business. The pastor continued by telling her that she should still keep faith in God and not look to other options to try to conceive because God still gives children even in this time and age. The woman told him how her friend came to her secretly and told her about IVF and other options for fertility, that now people can plan their children and not even wait on God for them. This woman was in deep thought about the matter and she was seriously considering it. The pastor then told her that doesn't she remember Abraham and Sarah? They waited on the Lord for their covenant child of promise. Despite being past the childbearing age, it was indeed a miracle. He urged her to keep holding on to God and not bother trying other means if she really wanted a miracle child and a child of destiny. This challenged the woman's faith, and even though her mind was made up on the previous matter, the pastor was able to pacify her and remind her that she is not late and she should not compare herself to other people, and she has a glorious destiny and she is a mother of nations, and the children she will carry in fact by herself and with her womb. It wasn't easy for Bidemi to agree, but after all that has been said and done, she trusted the spiritual leadership over her life and decided to listen to what her pastor was saying. After all, she trusted his guidance for her life, and it wasn't the first time that he had led them in matters like this. In a multitude of counselors, there is indeed safety. She decided to trust in the safety of what her pastor and shepherd over her soul was saying. They proceeded now to even pray together, and the matter even finished at that point. On the other hand, James, the young man whose father had died, was seen trying to make a very dangerous decision that would endanger both his life and his sister's life even his mother's. He followed a friend to go and join a cult because he needed money. The friend had told him that if he successfully joins the cult, they were going to give him money that they needed for their admission to get into a higher institution. Then Mrs. Bidemi was seen in a revelation talking to a man who was known as God. He told her that she should have faith in God because she was a mother of nations. Mrs. Bidemi was challenged because she said, how can a barren woman like her be a mother of nations? But God kept telling her that she is going to carry nations in her womb. She did not really believe it, but after all, it was God that was speaking. And if there is one thing with God, is that he always keeps his appointments. She woke up from the dream and decided to narrate all that she had seen to her husband. They went upstairs and she started telling him how God had come to her expressly, telling her that she should wait on him because he wanted to use their life as an example. The husband proceeded to tell her that God had spoken enough to them. Now it is time for them to hold on to the words in which he has spoken countless times over their lives. This encouraged Mrs. Bidemi in faith, and she decided and made up her mind that they were going to stand for righteousness and wait on God, even if it means waiting forever, even if it means waiting for a very, 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 very long time. They decided to pray and commit their lives into God's hands, rededicating their ministry and everything about them, waiting on God for his promise. Next, the Kayodes came to visit Mrs. Bidemi out of concern, asking her if she had considered their option of an IVF, but she told them that she was content with what God was giving to her, and the ministry he had even committed into their hands was enough to keep them busy before they have a child. But the Kayodes did not believe her. They tried to persuade her, but this woman's mind was made up and her resolve was there. The children came to see her before she left. She looked at them longingly and even gave them some cash to spend on themselves as a good woman that she was. Next, her husband was seen driving and talking to her on phone. She asked him where he was headed to. He told her he was going to see his mother. She had summoned him after a while, and he knew that it would not be any other issue other than Bidemi and her inability to bear children. The mother took him to her car, telling him that the car developed a fault, but she didn't want a mechanic to repair the car. She wanted him. While in the process of repairing the car, the mother started asking and saying, how long will they wait on God for a child? Bidemi's husband was saddened because he saw this coming. He knew that his mother was up to something. He kindly told her that there was nothing wrong with Bidemi, and when the Lord gives them a child, he will give them. The mother proceeded to tell him that she remembered that his stepmother was angry with him and vowed that he was never going to have a child. Bidemi's husband told her that no evil enchantment over their lives is going to stand, and even if the curse which the woman placed on them was going to stand, it would be because the Lord had allowed it. The mother would have none of it. She was livid. She wanted an answer and a solution from him immediately, but Bidemi's husband would not budge. He told her that if God had allowed this situation, it would be that he wanted to glorify his name, even using the man blind Bartimaeus as an example. The mother knew that indeed this man is one that is from God, and she felt bad immediately that she was trying to push him into going to other means. She apologized to him and told him that she would wait with them and they would pray together. They were seen hugging and making amends, and the matter finished. The next scene shows the pastor in his office, and a woman walked into the office despite the secretary's attempt to stop her. There seated was Mrs. Bidemi and another woman, and this woman who came in was so in need of help. She came in despite the secretary trying to stop her, and the pastor allowed her to stay. The pastor then proceeded to ask the woman what made her so persistent that she could not even wait for the secretary to allow her to come in. She began to tell the man how her children got admission into college, but they were at home because she could not afford their tuition and every other thing that they needed to go to school. This was a very sad tale as she narrated how this became so hard after the death of her beloved husband, Mr. Sampson, whom we saw at the beginning. Unfortunately, the pastor told her that he could not really be of so much help since she was not a member of the church. This saddened the woman and she began to cry, telling him how they were going to lose their admission if they could not afford tuition and other requirements for their institution. This story was so sad. The pastor honestly wanted to help her, but it was against the principles of the church. The woman begged. She begged and begged, but there was nothing. The pastor then told her to drop her details with the receptionist so he could contact her in case anything was going to be done, even personally by him. Then he called the secretary to tee the woman off and record her details with them. The woman then proceeded to leave the office. She was sad that she didn't get what she wanted, but what could she do? She only hoped because she believed that God sent her to this church to seek for help. Even though help was not coming at this time, she still held her faith in God and believed that something good was still going to come out of it. She left, and on her way home, she was thinking in a keke. She was wondering how she was going to face her children, what she was going to tell them since she left home saying that God had sent her there. By the time she got home, her son James was already questioning and bombarding her. He was saying, hope she got the money from the church. Her daughter also Lydia was asking and saying, Mommy, what is the update from where you went to? The woman told them that there was nothing that she could do, that they should be optimistic because they will soon go to school. But James would not have any of it. He was saying that she was so sure that God told her to go to the church. How comes she didn't receive the help that she went there for? The woman was so devastated. She asked him why he was doubting God. Why is he removing his faith from God now because of a little challenge? James would have none of it. He was so pissed off because he wanted to have his way immediately. He was not ready to wait for God and whatsoever God wanted to do. He was even angry, saying that has God not done enough? God took their father away. Now God wants to take their admission away. He walked out on his mother, and his mother called him back to order and told him to come and sit down. He had no right to walk out on her and then walk out on the promises that God has laid over their lives. She proceeded to caution them to not allow circumstances make them give the devil a chance and doubt their faith in God, because the devil is very cunning and their present situation cannot define them. Though sorrows may last for a night or suffering may last for a night, joy will come in the morning. James then went to meet his friend that took him to the gang. They promised to give him a good sum of money if only he could bring his sister for free and the boss would have his way with her. James thought of this. All he needed was 500,000 naira, and if it would take just one night the sister would have with the boss, he was willing to do anything for this money, because according to him, he refused to lose his admission just because of money. He decided that he was going to convince Lydia to sleep with the boss and defile herself. He went home to meet her. On getting home, he decided to speak to Lydia, telling her that there was one way out of this their predicament. Lydia was attentive and listened to him. He told her that all she needed to do was to spend a night with the boss, and Lydia would have none of it. She didn't believe that the boss would give her money without doing anything shady. Oh, she said no, she cannot trade her virtues for money. James, on the other hand, was determined and decided that he was going to do whatsoever it takes. Whatsoever he was going to do, even if it meant sacrificing his sister's dignity. Anyhow, anyway, he was not going to lose his admission. On the other hand, Lydia said that she would not do anything to spoil herself in front of God and man. James would not have it. He was saying that she shouldn't even preach to him and that he was tired of waiting before this opportunity passes them by. He said anyhow, anyway, he's going to go, whether she follows him or not. He walked out on her, leaving a bewildered lady. The next scene shows Mrs. Uche Samson trying to take a loan of 500,000 naira. She wanted to take that loan so urgently because she did not want her children to be out of school and lose their admission. The loan manager even told her that she couldn't take this loan if she had no other source of income apart from being a missionary. But Mrs. Uche would not have it. She begged him, telling him that there was nothing she could do, now because her hands were tied and she did not want her children to stay at home because of lack of funds. The man then told her to go back and come the next day when she had thought over this thing, because taking a loan of that sum with the interest would wreck her, especially if she did not have a lively source of income. Though she was unhappy, Mrs. Uche left the office saying she was going to think about it. On getting home, she met a James with his mind made up. He had made up his mind that he was going to meet that gang for money, and whatsoever it is that he was going to do, even if it meant selling his soul, he was going to do so just because of money for admission. His mother begged him, cautioned him, and warned him that it was not at a time like this that he would give up on God because of admission. But James set his face to another side. He made up his mind that there was nothing his mother would do to stop him. She persuaded him to help her in this matter. He was supposed to stand with her as the man of the house. Unfortunately, James had other plans. He decided that if God was not going to help them in this matter, he was going to take laws into his own hands, all to the end that he would secure his admission. He said that even if Lydia was not going to follow him to that place, he was going to go and he would do whatsoever it takes him just to secure the sum of 500,000 naira in order to further his education. His mother told him that the company of those people are corruptive, and before time he might lose his way and never come back to his senses. The devastated Mrs. Uche begged James to please stay, but he would have none of it. Lydia sat down there. There was nothing she could do because she knew that James's mind was already made up. His mother told him that she has been praying, and God is a God of all fatherless, and he is the husband to widows. She told them that they should join hands in prayer. God will intervene on their situation. But James refused. He was adamant, already made up. He said he would not join them in prayer because he didn't believe God had any hand in the matter again. Immediately, they saw that two people were outside waiting to see them. They went out and they saw Mrs. Bidemi and her husband. They were asking that, is she the Mrs. Samson Uche? Mrs. Uche replied yes. She told them to come in, and she was wondering why they were looking for her. But since they were looking for her, she wanted them to come in and see her. Perhaps they could be the God-sent angels. They entered inside, and then this couple began to narrate to Mrs. Uche how since Bidemi met her at the church earlier, her spirit had been troubled. She could no longer sleep or rest because all she could see was the face of the poor widow begging the pastor for help, begging the pastor to help her and her children before they lose the admission. Mrs. Bidemi confided and told her that she went behind the pastor to take her phone number from the secretary because she really needed to see Mrs. Uche. Mrs. Uche was surprised because she knew that God had been working something behind the scene, but this was all too big for her to comprehend. And they even told her that God sent them to bring some sum of money to them. The husband handed over a large envelope to her, telling her that this was what God laid in their hearts to do for them. Mrs. Uche held onto the envelope. She was in tears because she didn't believe God works this fast and on time. In addition, Mrs. Bidemi told her to send her account details because she was going to send her some sum of money that would take James and Lydia through school. She asked her how much they would be needing for their admission. Mrs. Uche told her a sum of 500,000 naira, but Mrs. Bidemi and her husband decided that they were going to give her and her children the sum of 1 million naira that was supposed to take them through their schooling. The children were so surprised. The couple even told them that if they needed more, they could call them, so they got their contacts from them. The children watched as this couple drove off. This was indeed a God-sent package. Back in the house, the mother started singing worship to Jehovah because she knew that the Lord only would be the one that can do such a great thing. It was like to them as unto a dream. She could not believe that their story could change overnight. Just a few minutes ago, they were quarreling and fighting in the house, crying to the Lord because it looked all hopeless. But just a moment later, God came on time and rescued them. Though they waited for a while, though it looked like nothing was happening for a while, God was working behind the scene. A sober James was seen begging his mother and begging the Lord to forgive him because he was not patient enough to wait for the promises of God. The mother was consoling him. She was so grateful to God for remembering a poor and husbandless widow like her, but she knew that God has never disappointed her and he will not ever disappoint her again. James was seen begging and crying, asking his mother if the Lord would still trust him because he felt like he was too filthy for the Lord to forgive. But the mother told him that he should stand up because the Lord has forgiven him, because the Lord knew that his faith was not able to carry him. The mother said all of them actually had trusted in their own ways at a point, but now they needed the mercies of Jesus and they were grateful unto him because he has delivered them. The mother then embraced them and admonished them that they should serve the God of their father because the God of their father is able to deliver them and he had delivered them from their many troubles. He is able to meet their needs. They do not need to look at other sources. They must always remember that the God of their father, Mr. Samson, is able to deliver them. Henceforth, their spirits were lifted. They knew that they had no other resolution but to serve this God. They were happy. She embraced them and they had a lovely time together. After a while, a better-looking Mrs. Uche called Mrs. Bidemi and told her that she just wanted to say hello to her and thank her for everything that the Lord has used her to achieve in her family. She decided to tell her how the children were faring in school and how she noticed that the devil wanted to use that admission issue to take away their joy, and how the devil wanted to make her husband's death an issue and how to use it to destroy their home. Mrs. Bidemi was shocked. She was happy for them that the Lord actually could use her and her husband to impact a whole generation, to impact a family. She was grateful and she was happy. Mrs. Uche then asked Mrs. Bidemi about her children. Mrs. Bidemi told her she was waiting on God. Mrs. Uche laughed and said she thought she saw her and 2 boys yesterday night in a dream. But Mrs. Bidemi told her she was waiting on the Lord. Mrs. Uche congratulated her and told her that the Lord has done it. The Lord has done it because they have come. Her children has come. So Mrs. Uche told her that she should not worry. She kept on congratulating her that her children are here. She should start preparing because there are 2 boys, 2 nations in her womb, just as the Lord has instructed, like Esau and Jacob. Mrs. Bidemi was surprised, but she believed because it was the word of the Lord that it would come to pass. After a while, the word of the Lord actually came to pass, and we can see a happy family and community celebrating the birth of 2 special children, John and James. The 2 adorable children were born after 14 years of waiting on God, 14 years of constant tears and sorrows, 14 years of mockery. The Lord is able to do what he has promised. This couple were so happy, and you can see that everyone around them were grateful unto God as they prayed for the future of these children. They prayed for their souls, they prayed for their life, and they began rejoicing, being grateful unto the Lord because he alone is able to do such a wonderful thing. The family were so happy. They were joyful. The Lord is able to do it. The Lord is able to fulfill his promises. I want to tell you today that the Lord is able to bring that word that he has said about you to pass. God always keeps his appointment. Just trust him. To see more movie recaps like this, please subscribe to this YouTube channel and click on the notification bell to get updates anytime a new video is uploaded. Until next time.